Melissa swirled her wine and froze. On the evening news glowed a food truck, Evelyn's Soul Food, and beside it a smiling black teenager the anchor called Atlanta's newest sensation. The glass slipped half an inch in her grip. She knew that face. Harry, her late husband's son. The boy she had thrown into the street 8 months ago with one suitcase and $300. Her hand tightened over the stack of overdue debt notices on the table. How had a penniless 16-year-old become the city's hottest name in 8 months? The house on Ardmore Lane had never felt like Harry's, and Melissa made certain of that in 100 small ways. She rearranged the furniture the week she married his father, and never once asked his opinion of it. She set a separate hand towel in the guest bathroom and let it be understood without ever saying so which one was his. When her friends came for bridge on Thursdays, she introduced him as my husband's boy and steered the conversation elsewhere before anyone could ask a second question. Harry learned to be quiet in that house. He was 16 and tall in a way that still surprised him in mirrors, and he had discovered that the safest place to exist was the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. There on the counter beside the good stove, Melissa rarely used, he kept the one thing that was truly his. A worn, spiral notebook with a cracked cover, the pages soft as cloth from years of handling. It had belonged to his grandmother, Evelyn, his mother's mother. She had raised him for the first stretch of his life after his mother died young and before his father remarried, and she had filled that notebook in a slanting hand with the recipes that had come down through her own mother and grandmother before her. Gumbo and smothered chicken red beans cooked low all afternoon cornbread that tasted faintly of the cast iron it was baked in. To Harry, the notebook was not a book of instructions. It was the sound of her voice, and the one thread back to a side of himself the house on Ardmore Lane had no room for. His father loved him. That much had always been true, even if it was a quiet love that lived under Melissa's louder presence. Thomas Carter was a soft-spoken man who worked long hours and came home tired, and he had married Melissa during a lonely year and spent the rest of his time apologizing for the cold she carried into every room. He kept telling Harry that things would settle, that Melissa would warm. Harry stopped believing it around his 15th birthday, but he never said so because his father looked so hopeful when he said it. What Harry did not know, what almost no one knew, was that the comfort of the house on Ardmore Lane was a painted-over thing. Behind the wine and the bridge afternoons and the country club dues, Melissa had spent years quietly borrowing against everything Thomas owned. She had a talent for appearances and a deeper talent for debt, and she had taught herself to smile across a dinner table while a second mortgage sat unsigned in her desk drawer waiting for the right moment. Thomas trusted her with the paperwork because trusting her was easier than reading it. By the time anything could have been done, there was very little left underneath the surface but the surface itself. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday in early spring, Thomas Carter's heart stopped between one breath and the next. He was 49. He left for work in the morning and did not come home, and the house that had never felt like Harry's became a place Harry no longer recognized at all. The days after the funeral moved with a strange, clipped efficiency, and Harry understood only later that the efficiency had been rehearsed. Melissa had a lawyer at the house within the week, a smooth, gray-suited man named Gerald Pruitt, who spoke in the gentle tones people use when they are about to take something from you. There were papers Thomas had signed without reading. There were accounts in Melissa's name. There was a will or a version of one that left everything to her and made no provision for the boy who was not legally hers. Harry did not fight it. He was 16 and grieving, and did not even know what fighting it would look like. He sat at the edge of the conversation while Melissa and Pruitt arranged his father's life into columns, and he kept waiting for someone to remember he was in the room. Melissa remembered him on a Saturday morning, 10 days after the funeral. She found him in the kitchen with the notebook open on the counter, already dressed, and composed a cup of coffee balanced in one hand, and she looked at him the way she might look at a stain that had not come out in the wash. "You can't stay here," she said. "I want to be clear about that so there are no misunderstandings later." Harry closed the notebook slowly. "This is my dad's house. This is my house. It has been my house for some time. The lawyers have explained all of this." She set the coffee down. "I'm not a cruel woman, Harry, but you're not my responsibility, and I won't pretend otherwise just because it would look nice." He waited for some softening, some crack. None came. Melissa had decided this long before she walked into the kitchen, and there was nothing in her face but the arithmetic of a woman closing an account she no longer wished to carry. She had already packed for him. That was the detail that stayed with him afterward, that she had gone into his room while he slept and put his life into a single battered suitcase, as though deciding for him what was worth keeping. She set it by the door, and on top of it she placed the spiral notebook, which she clearly considered worthless, and an envelope. "There's $300 in there," she said. "That's more than I owe you, which is nothing. Don't come back asking for more because there isn't any and there won't be." Harry picked up the suitcase. He picked up the notebook last and held it a moment longer than the rest. Then he walked out of the house on Ardmore Lane into a spring morning that was indecently bright, and the door closed behind him with the soft final click of a thing that would not open again. He had nowhere to go, which is a particular kind of fact that does not feel real until the afternoon wears on, and the question of where to sleep stops being abstract. He walked a long time. He spent a little of the $300 on a bus across the city, and a little more over the next 2 days on the cheapest food he could find, and the small costs of having no roof, until what was left had thinned to $220, and the only person he could think of who might not turn him away. Hank Doyle ran a one-bay auto shop on the rough southern edge of the city, a cinder-block building with a hand-painted sign and a perpetual smell of motor oil and burnt coffee. He had fixed Thomas Carter's old truck for years and had taken a liking to the quiet kid who used to ride along and ask how engines worked. Hank was somewhere past 50, a widower with a gray mustache and forearms like cured rope, and he carried a private grief of his own, a son he hadn't spoken to in a decade, for reasons he never explained and Harry never asked. When Harry turned up at the shop at dusk with a suitcase and a face that had clearly been crying somewhere private, Hank didn't make him explain. He looked at the boy, looked at the suitcase and said, "There's a cot in the back. It's not much." "I can pay," Harry said. "A little." "You can keep your little. Put your bag down." The back room was a storage space with a torn mattress on a folding cot, a space heater, and shelves of parts that smelled of grease. It was that night the kindest place in the world. Harry lay in the dark, listening to the tick of the cooling building, and tried to understand how a person could have a father on Monday and a torn mattress in a stranger's garage by the following week. He couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, he turned on the space heater for the light of its orange coils and opened the notebook because it was the only voice he had left. He turned the soft pages slowly past the gumbo and the red beans, and somewhere near the middle he stopped at a page where his grandmother had written something that was not a recipe at all. Beneath the ingredients for her cornbread, in that same slanting hand, she had written a single line, as if she had stopped mid-thought and decided it mattered more than the bread. "Food isn't just food," it read. "It's how we keep our soul and where we come from." Harry read it 4 times. He thought about his grandmother's kitchen, the one from before, where the windows fogged with steam and the radio played low and nobody ever made him feel like a stain. He thought about the fact that the only inheritance Melissa had let him keep was the one she thought was worthless, and that it might be the only thing in the suitcase actually worth anything. He had 2 choices, and he was clear-eyed enough at 2 in the morning to see them both. He could find some job that would take a 16-year-old bag groceries or wash dishes and survive 1 shift at a time. It was the safe choice, the choice his father probably would have wanted because his father had wanted safety more than anything, and look where it had gotten him. Or he could do the other thing, the reckless thing, with the $220 he had left. By morning he had decided, and once he decided, he moved fast, the way people do when standing still has become unbearable. He told Hank his plan over the burnt coffee, half expecting to be laughed at. Hank listened, scratched his mustache, and said only, "Pot's no good. You'll need a real one. There's a restaurant supply place 2 streets over does cash." Harry spent most of the $220 that day, a heavy stock pot second-hand, chicken and sausage and the holy trinity of onion, celery, and bell pepper, flour for the roux, because his grandmother's gumbo lived or died by the roux by standing over it and stirring until it turned the color of a copper penny and you thought you'd ruined it and then kept going. He cooked it on Hank's hot plate in the back room, and the smell of it drifted out the open bay door, and by late afternoon 2 of Hank's neighbors had wandered over to ask what on earth that was. The next morning, he carried the pot out to the corner where the day laborers gathered before dawn, men who worked with their hands and had not eaten anything warm in hours. He had no sign and no permit and no idea what he was doing. He had a pot of his grandmother's gumbo, a stack of foam bowls, and a price he'd picked because it sounded fair. He sold out in under an hour. He stood there with an empty pot and a small sweaty fold of bills, feeling for the first time in 2 weeks something that was not grief, and it was only when he sat down to count the money against what he'd spent that the second feeling arrived. He had charged $3 a bowl. The chicken and the sausage and the trinity and the flour divided across the bowls he'd sold had cost him more than that. He had fed 30 hungry men a meal they'd practically wept over, and he had lost money doing it. Harry sat on the curb with the empty pot between his knees and laughed a short, surprised sound with no bitterness in it. His grandmother had taught him to cook. She had not taught him to count. That was a different notebook, and he was going to have to write it himself. He went back to the supply store that afternoon and started over, and this time he did the arithmetic first. The arithmetic changed everything, and it changed nothing. He learned to price a bowl so that it covered the chicken and the flour and left a few coins over, and within a week the coins had become a small, reliable pile he kept rolled in a sock at the bottom of his suitcase. But the thing that made the gumbo sell was the same thing that had made him lose money on the first pot. It tasted like someone's grandmother had made it because someone's grandmother had, by way of a notebook and a boy who refused to cut corners, she would not have cut. Word moved the way it moves in a working neighborhood by mouth and by stomach. The day laborers told the men at the loading docks, and the men at the docks told their wives, and by the 3rd week, Harry was cooking 2 pots before dawn and selling out of both before the morning was old. He added the smothered chicken over rice, then a 3rd item. He bought a folding table and a canopy set up on the same corner every morning, and people began to look for him there. It was the kind of good that draws attention from the people whose job it is to notice things without permits. The officer was not unkind about it, a heavy-set patrolman named Briggs, who had in fact bought gumbo twice and liked it. He explained that a folding table on a public corner selling food cooked on a hot plate in an auto shop was a stack of violations as tall as the boy himself. Health code, vending permits, a commercial kitchen the food had to come from. He wasn't going to write it up today, but somebody would because somebody always did. "You got a real operation here, kid," Briggs said. "That's the problem. Nobody bothers the guy selling 3 sandwiches. They bother the guy with a line." Harry had a line. He looked back at the dozen people waiting in the cold and understood that his success was also the thing that would end him. He spent that night doing the math, and the math was bleak. A licensed food truck with a stainless interior and a commissary kitchen on file was the only legal way forward, and a used one in any condition started at a number with 5 digits in it. He had a sock full of rolled bills that did not come close. No bank lends to a 16-year-old with no assets and no credit, and there was a wall behind even that wall. One he discovered when a loan officer told him gently that he could not legally hold a business license in his own name at all. Not at 16. He would need an adult, a partner of legal age on the paperwork, on the permit, on the hook. He walked out into a hard rain that did not let up for 6 days. Those were the worst days. Nobody stands on a corner in the rain for a bowl of gumbo, and the pile in the sock stopped growing and began to shrink. One afternoon, a pot of red beans, scorched on the bottom, while he was hauling supplies in from the rain, and he had to throw out the whole pot and refund the 4 people who'd already bought from it. He stood watching beans he couldn't afford slide into the trash and felt the floor tilt. Hank found him there and didn't say anything comforting because comfort wasn't his register. He looked at the ruined pot and said, "Heat was too high and you walked away from it. Won't happen twice now." Then he poured 2 cups of his terrible coffee and sat down on an overturned bucket, and that was its own kind of comfort, the kind that treats a person like they're going to survive the thing they're inside of. It was during the rain that Cody turned up. He was a few years older than Harry, a community college kid with a camera he could barely afford, and an opinion about everything. He'd been buying gumbo on his way to early classes for a month, and one wet morning he said around a mouthful of food that Harry was sitting on a gold mine and didn't know it. "You think this is about gumbo," Cody said. "It's not. I mean, it is. It's incredible. But that's not the thing. The thing is you. 16 out here before sunrise cooking your grandmother's recipes on a corner. People eat stories now more than they eat food." Harry cold and broke, and a day past throwing out a pot of beans was not in a mood for it. "People can't eat a story for breakfast." "No," Cody agreed, "but they'll drive across town for one. Let me film you. If it does nothing, you've lost nothing." It did not do nothing. The rain stopped, the corner came back to life, and Cody started showing up at dawn with his camera. He filmed the roux going dark, the steam, Harry's hands, the line of working men in the cold. He filmed Harry talking reluctantly at first, and then less so about a grandmother named Evelyn and a notebook and a line written under a cornbread recipe. One of the videos, Harry stirring a roux in the dark, saying that food was how you kept your soul and where you came from, did the thing videos occasionally do. It traveled from hundreds to thousands to a number Harry checked 3 times before he believed it. The truck, when he found it, was not anything anyone would have called a truck. It sat at the back of a salvage yard on 4 flat tires, a boxy old step van the color of nothing, panels brown with rust interior gutted to bare metal. The yard wanted almost nothing for it precisely because it was almost nothing. Harry did not have sane accounting. He had a vision, a sock full of bills that covered the price of the shell with a little left, and an idea so reckless he was almost embarrassed to say it out loud. He said it to Hank in the open bay, the 2 of them looking at a photo of the rusted van on Harry's cracked phone. "I can't pay you to fix it. I can't pay any of the guys you'd need. But I can cook. I'll cook for you, for all of you, every single day until it runs. My grandmother's food. That's what I've got to trade." Hank looked at the photo a long while. The mustache worked. When he spoke, he wasn't talking about the truck at all. "My boy used to want to do something like this, build a thing from nothing. I told him it was foolish, told him to get a steady job, keep his head down. He did the opposite, and he doesn't call me anymore. And I've had a lot of years to wonder whether the problem was him being foolish or me being scared." He handed the phone back. "I've got a couple guys owe me favors. We'll need a welder. It's gonna take weeks and half of it's gonna be ugly. You'll do it. I'll do it for the food and because I'm tired of being the kind of man who talks somebody out of something. And if you poison me with that hot plate cooking deal's off." What happened over the next several weeks became, in its own small way, the heart of the whole thing. Word went out through Hank's web of favors, and men began turning up in the evenings after their own jobs were done. A retired bodywork man who could make rusted panels smooth again. A younger guy who knew refrigeration. A taciturn welder named Pat, who worked for 2 of Harry's biscuits and a thermos of coffee and said more with her torch than with her mouth. They came for the food at first. They stayed for the thing the food turned them into, which was a crew. Cody filmed all of it. The crew became the content, and the content became the legend, before there was anything to be legendary about a rusted van, a teenage cook, and a handful of working people building something for the price of supper. Hank settled the paperwork without being asked. He sat Harry down one evening with a stack of forms and said that since the boy couldn't hold the license or the permit or the title in his own name, he, Hank, would put his name on them. Co-owner on paper, co-signer on the permit. The truck titled to Doyle Automotive, with the boy as the heart of the operation and the older man as its legal spine. "I'm not taking the business," Hank said. "It's yours. The recipes are yours, the name's yours, the work's yours. My name's just on the line because the state won't let yours be there yet. When you're old enough, we change it. Until then, anybody comes after this thing, they come through me first." Harry would remember that sentence later with a cold weight in his stomach because it would turn out to be more literally true than either of them meant it. They painted the truck black, deep and clean, and a sign painter who owed Hank a favor lettered the name in gold Evelyn's Soul Food, and below it smaller, the line from the notebook. Harry stood in the salvage yard light the evening it was finished, and looked at his grandmother's name in gold on the side of a truck that had a permit taped inside the window, and a commissary kitchen on file that was against every reasonable expectation. Legal. And he had to turn away from the crew so they wouldn't see his face do what it was doing. The truck's first real day was a small riot. Cody had counted it down for a week, and when Harry parked the black van on a corner near the city's revitalized west side, there was already a line before he opened the window. He sold out the gumbo by 10 and the smothered chicken by noon, and had to apologize, laughing helpless to people who'd driven 40 minutes for food that was already gone. He did better the second day, and better the third. The sock of rolled bills became a bank account opened necessarily with Hank's name beside his, and the account began to do something Harry had never seen money do before. It grew while he slept. Evelyn's Soul Food became, in Cody's language, a phenomenon. Not a national one, a city one which was enough. The local food writers found it. The corner became a destination. And then a reporter from one of the local stations came down with a cameraman and a microphone, and a sincere, slightly nervous manner. Her name was Diane, and she did the human interest segments that air at the end of the news to send people to bed feeling better about the world. She got Harry talking past the rehearsed answers, the notebook, the grandmother, the line about the soul, though he said nothing on camera about Ardmore Lane or the $300 because some grief a person keeps even from a kind reporter. The segment aired on a Thursday evening. It was 4 minutes long, and it was the kind of thing that makes a city briefly fall in love with a teenager and his late grandmother's gumbo. It was also playing on a television in a house on Ardmore Lane in front of a woman holding a glass of wine and a stack of overdue notices. Melissa's life in the 8 months since the funeral had gone the opposite direction from Harry's. The appearances she had spent years maintaining had begun to fail her. The second mortgage had come due, and then the lines of credit she'd opened against accounts emptier than she'd let herself believe. The country club had sent a discreet letter about her dues. 2 of her bridge friends had stopped returning calls in the particular way that means they'd heard something. She had inherited everything Thomas owned and discovered too late that everything Thomas owned had been mostly the idea of money rather than the thing itself, an idea she herself had hollowed out over years of borrowing against it. So when Melissa saw the black truck on the evening news, she did not see a grieving boy who'd built something out of nothing. She saw an asset. A brand with momentum and a sympathetic story and a revenue stream, all of it attached to a 16-year-old who legally could not even own it. And she saw with the swift clarity of a drowning person spotting a piece of driftwood away out of the water. Her first move was soft, and that was the cruelest part of it. A text message 2 days after the segment aired to a number she'd kept. She wrote that she had seen him on the news, that she was proud, in spite of everything that grief had made them both say and do things. And that family was family. She signed it with a warmth that cost her nothing and that she did not feel. Harry read it standing in the back of the truck at the end of a long day, and the sight of her name on his phone did something physical to him, a drop in the gut, the smell of that kitchen on Ardmore Lane. He did not answer for a full day. When he did, it was 2 words. He was not interested. That was when the warmth came off, and the shape underneath had Gerald Pruitt's letterhead on it. In the days right after Harry's refusal, Melissa moved with the speed of someone who'd just watched her driftwood start to float away. She went to Pruitt, and Pruitt did the cold, clever thing he had her file, a trademark application on the name Evelyn's Soul Food. The name now glowing on the evening news, the name a dead woman she had never respected had given to a kind of cooking she had always looked down on. The ink was barely dry on the filing when the first letter arrived at the commissary kitchen, certified with Hank's name on it because Hank's name was on everything. It was a cease and desist, vicious in the document-armored way only a good lawyer can manage. It informed the recipients that Evelyn's Soul Food was now the subject of a trademark held in Melissa's name and demanded they stop using it. It went further. It asserted that the recipes themselves were intellectual property belonging to the estate of Thomas Carter, the estate Melissa controlled, on the theory that they had passed to Thomas, and through Thomas to her. It claimed the $300 of seed capital had likewise been estate funds making the whole enterprise in Pruitt's smooth construction, a venture built on assets she owned. And it noted with a delicacy that was its own kind of threat, that an arrangement by which an adult held a business on behalf of a minor raised questions that interested parties might feel compelled to refer to the appropriate authorities. It was a wall built specifically to crush him, not because any single brick was strong, but because fighting it would take lawyers and money and time, and he had none of the three, and Melissa had all of them. Within days, accounts Harry had never heard of began posting that the food was unsafe. The truck was a front, the boy was being exploited by adults for money. None of it was true, and all of it was sticky. Two small investors who'd quietly approached Harry after the segment both went silent within a week, the way money always goes silent when it smells a lawsuit. Hank stood in the doorway of the back room with the certified letter in his hand, and a look on his face Harry hadn't seen before. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet, in a way that was worse than anger. She put my name in here too, and she's not just talking about the truck. The thing Pruitt's letter did to Hank was not the same thing it did to Harry. Harry it frightened. Hank it implicated, and the difference mattered. Hank sat down heavily on the overturned bucket that had become his thinking seat and explained it in the flat voice of a man reading his own bad news aloud. His name was on the truck title and the license and the permit, which had been the whole point. But that same name was attached to the auto shop, to a lease he held month to month, and to a line of credit he'd taken against the shop years ago and never fully paid down. Pruitt had done his homework. The letter's language about interested parties wasn't aimed only at the boy. It was aimed at the man whose signature held the boy up. "She's not coming for the gumbo," Hank said. "She's coming for the soft spots. Mine's the shop. She finds the right person to lean on, makes the right call, and I could lose the lease. Maybe more. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because you're 16 and you've had enough taken from you by people who hid things, and I'm not gonna be one more." Harry understood then the full shape of the trap, and it was worse than money. Melissa had found the one person who'd treated him like he was going to survive, and she had wired that man's livelihood to Harry's defiance. Fight back, and Hank went down with him. Surrender, and the thing Evelyn had left him passed to the woman who'd thrown her grandson into the street. The lawyers Harry called confirmed how little room he had. The two who would even talk to him said the same thing undoing the trademark would mean a cancellation proceeding that turned on proving prior use provable, probably but only over months and at a cost that climbed. The estate claim on the recipes was thin, almost certainly junk, but junk that had to be answered, and answering it cost the same as answering something real. One of them said the quiet part plainly. "A case like this isn't won by who's right. It's won by who can keep paying after the other side runs out of money, and you, son, are going to run out first." So Harry sat with the worst night since the first one, the space heater's coils throwing the same orange light they'd thrown 8 months earlier, and he did the arithmetic he'd taught himself to do, except this time the columns were not chicken and flour. They were people. He could settle. Pruitt had floated it in a second, softer letter. Sign over a controlling share to Melissa, fold the brand and its momentum and the gold name into her ownership, and the trademark claim evaporated, The estate noise went away, the threat to Hank dissolved, and Harry kept a minority piece and his peace of mind besides. It was the rational choice. His father would have taken it. His father had spent a whole marriage taking the version of that choice. Signing the paper he hadn't read because trusting was easier than fighting, and look where the easy choice had led. Or he could refuse and put a man's shop on the table to do it. What broke the deadlock was Hank, who refused to let the choice be Harry's alone. He came into the back room near midnight with 2 cups of his terrible coffee the way he had on the night of the burnt beans, and said his piece without decoration. "I know what you're doing in here. You're adding me up. Figuring whether your fight's worth my shop, and you've about decided to fold because you'd rather lose the thing than be the reason I lose mine." He took a long drink of the coffee. "So, I'm going to take that off your plate because it was never yours to carry. The shop's been dying slow for years. I keep the lights on, and that's about the whole of it. You want the truth. The best thing that's walked through that bay door in a decade is a 16-year-old with a soup pot and a dead woman's notebook." The mustache worked the way it did when he was near something he didn't say easily. "My boy built something once, and I told him to be careful. I'm done being the careful man. You fight her. If it costs me the lease, it'll be the first thing in years I lost standing up instead of sitting down." "It's not your fight," Harry said. "It became my fight the day my name went on your truck. That's what a name on a line means, son. It means you're in it. Questions not whether you fight. Questions how. You can't outspend her, so don't." It was Cody the next morning who turned that last sentence into a plan. He came to the shop with his laptop and a face full of something between fury and excitement. He'd been watching the platforms, and he'd noticed 2 things. The first was that the smear accounts had a sameness, a coordination, the unmistakable look of something paid for rather than felt. The second was bigger. "You can't beat her in a courtroom," Cody said. "That's her ground money and time she's got both. But she filed that trademark on a story she doesn't own, and she's fighting it in the one place she's weakest. She's a private woman who spent 20 years making people believe she's something she's not. You've got a camera, an audience that already loves you, and a true story she can't survive being told. You don't fight her with lawyers. You fight her with the truth out loud, where everyone can see it." The instrument was already waiting. Diane's segment had done well enough that her station wanted a follow-up to run live on the evening show. Harry called her back and said yes, and said something else too, that the follow-up was going to be a bigger story than she expected, and that he'd bring what he needed to prove it. Melissa found out because Pruitt's people watched the same platforms Cody did, and her response told Harry he'd finally found the soft spot that was hers. It came in 2 moves, both arriving the day before the live broadcast, and for a few hours it looked like both would land. The first was a legal threat to the station itself, a letter from Pruitt asserting the trademark warning that any broadcast trading on the protected name exposed the station to liability, demanding the segment be pulled. Diane called Harry in a tight voice to say the piece was suddenly under review, which is the sound a story makes right before it dies. The second move was aimed at Hank. Pruitt knew the shop was the spine, and he went at it directly. A call was made. Harry never learned to whom exactly, only what it produced, and by that afternoon, Hank had heard from the company that held the paper on his lease, raising concerns with a suspiciously fresh and specific shape. The message underneath was not subtle. The boy goes quiet. The concerns go away. The boy goes on television, and a struggling shop owner finds out how quickly a month-to-month lease becomes no lease at all. This was the moment the whole thing had been built to produce. Not an abstraction in a lawyer's letter now, but a real building with a real bay door that a real man had kept open long enough to save a kid's life. Harry went to Hank to call it off. He'd decided on the walk over. He would settle sign Melissa her share, keep the shop safe. He started to say it. Hank cut him off before he got 3 words out. Don't you dare come in here and hand her my shop to keep me comfortable. I already told you, this is the first thing I've stood up for in 10 years, and you are not going to take it from me to make yourself feel less guilty." He put a grease-stained hand flat on the workbench. "I called my boy last night. First time in, I won't tell you how long. Told him what we were doing. You know what he said? He said, 'Dad.' That's the most you've sounded in years. So you're going to go on that television tomorrow and you're going to tell the truth, and whatever it costs me, it's mine to spend. Are we clear?" Harry didn't trust his voice, so he nodded. "Then go cook something. You think better with your hands moving. Always have." The station nearly pulled the segment anyway. What saved it was Cody and Diane together, Cody handing her the evidence of the coordinated paid smear accounts, and Diane carrying it to her producers with the argument that the station was being pressured to kill a true story by the very person the story was about. A news director told he's being used as someone's lawyer tends to grow a spine. The segment went back on the schedule live that evening, and the legal threat sat unanswered on a desk because no one had time to be afraid of it anymore. Harry went on the air with the notebook in his hands. Diane started gently the way she had on the corner, but Harry didn't stay in the gentle place this time. When she asked how the business had grown, he set it down, the whole of it, plainly in the calm of a person who has stopped being afraid. He told them about the father who died on an ordinary Tuesday. He told them about the morning 10 days after the funeral when his stepmother had handed him a suitcase she'd packed herself, a worthless old notebook and exactly $300, and shown him the door of a house that was no longer his. He named her. He told them what she was doing now. The trademark filed on a dead woman's name only after the boy's success aired on the news, the claim that a black grandmother's recipes belonged to a white woman's estate, the threats against the man whose only crime was signing his name, so a 16-year-old could legally sell soup. Then he proved it, which was the part Melissa could not survive. He opened the notebook to the camera, and Diane's people pushed in close, and there on the screen were the pages, the soft cloth-worn paper, the slanting hand, and crucially the dates, his grandmother's habit of marking when she'd written a thing years and years before any of this. He laid beside it the timeline Cody had built the earliest videos with their unalterable timestamps, the photographs of a folding table on a working corner, the dated record of a boy selling his grandmother's gumbo under that very name for months before Melissa had ever filed her application. The story he was telling wasn't his opinion. It was documented, and the documents ran the wrong way for her. The contrast did the rest because television is a machine for contrast. A woman in a house full of debt she'd hidden reaching out to claim a grandmother she'd despised. A boy who'd built something out of $220 and a notebook refusing to give it up. People did not need to be told which one to believe. What happened after the broadcast happened fast, the way these things do once the truth gets enough velocity behind it. The smear accounts exposed on air as coordinated and paid curdled overnight into a liability for the side that had bought them. The investors who'd gone silent came back. And the thing that turned the tide for good was the thing Harry hadn't dared hope for a trademark attorney, a woman who'd watched the segment and recognized exactly what Melissa had pulled. Reached out the next morning and offered to take the cancellation pro bono. She'd seen 100 of these, she said. Filing on someone else's established name and calling it yours had a word, and the word was fraud, and she would enjoy unwinding it. Over the following weeks, the application was challenged on the documented record of prior use. The estate claim on the recipes collapsed under the simple weight of the dated pages, and the threats against Hank's shop evaporated the moment the person making them realized they were now attached to a public villain. Melissa did not recover. The broadcast had done to her appearances what a single hard rain does to a thing held together by paint. The bridge friends who'd merely gone quiet now went absent altogether. The country club's discreet letter became a final one. The debts she'd spent 20 years hiding behind a smile no longer had a smile to hide behind because everyone had seen the smile for what it was. She withdrew the claim. There was nothing dignified about the withdrawal and nothing left to be dignified with. The night of the broadcast. Harry walked out of the station into a spring evening and found Hank and Cody waiting by the black truck at the curb, and Hank had his phone in his hand and a look on his face, Harry had never seen there, soft and undone, and he said his boy had called him after watching and they'd talked for an hour. Harry understood that whatever the truck had earned that night, it had earned that too. A year after the funeral, almost to the day, the orphaned boy who'd been handed a suitcase and $300 was the owner of a soul food brand worth millions, with a gleaming central kitchen and a small fleet of trucks rolling out across the city each morning. Hank's shop did the maintenance on every one of them, busier than it had been in 20 years, the bay doors open and the burnt coffee always going. Cody ran the cameras and the accounts, and still claimed to anyone who'd listen that it had all been his idea. But 2 days a week, Harry still parked the original. The worn black van, its gold letters touched up, but the dents left honest on the working corner where it had all started, and worked the window himself. He could have stopped. He didn't want to. And inside the main kitchen, where the new cooks learned the roux the way his grandmother had written it, 2 things hung framed under glass on the wall above the line, a photograph of Evelyn, smiling the way she had in the kitchen, with the fogged windows, and the soft, cracked notebook open to the page where a woman who'd raised him had once stopped mid-thought to write that food was how you keep your soul and where you come from. Melissa had let him keep the one thing she thought was worthless. It had turned out to be everything she could not take. That was Harry's whole journey, from a single suitcase, an old notebook, and $300 to a name lettered in gold on the side of a truck. If this story landed somewhere for you, I'd love to know which moment stayed with you most. The rainy night and the scorched pot of beans, the things Hank said about his son, or the moment Harry opened that notebook to the camera. And I'm honestly curious, have you ever watched someone go through something like this, or lived it yourself? Someone stripped of everything who stood back up using the one thing other people wrote off as worthless. Real stories like that are the best material there is for the ones I write next. If you're comfortable sharing, drop it in the comments. Even a small piece is enough. Your story might just be the seed for the next episode.